We're in the book of James. How many of you read the book of James? All right, accompanying the book of James is Ezekiel. We're not going to get into Ezekiel today. We're going to focus on James. I tried to weave them together. It's just too hard. James there's too much in James I wanted to cover. And so maybe we'll come back to Ezekiel on a later day. But I want to ask this question. Is your faith in God genuine? How do you know your faith in God is genuine? Where you trust God 100%. Is your faith in God genuine? And if you nod your head, yes. If you say, yeah, my faith in God is genuine, then you read the book of James, he's going to give you 2 words. Prove it. Right? I mean, that's the book of James, right? Prove it. And how do you prove it? And many people want to shout out works, because James talks a lot about works, right? And so is that truly how you prove your faith? Is it by your works? Maybe you came up on Tuesday when we passed out boxes of free produce to families in need. Maybe you greet at the door. Maybe you help in the children's ministry. Maybe you set up the delicious treats. Serving God in those ways, does that prove you have genuine faith? If you read the book of James, you might think, yeah, that is. I do good things. I serve others. That's proving my faith. But is James really saying that? I don't think he is. I don't believe he's saying that. I don't think you have to get to work to prove your faith. I think the work is just going to come to you in the form of trials. If you read the book of James, you know that trials come about, right? Monday, for me, was one of those days. You ever have one of those days? Right? Monday, we had gotten back from vacation. Our dog had a cut on its leg. We had to take it to the vet. Took it to the vet. We picked it up at 3:30. And for 4 stitches, it was $350. Right? Some of you are like, man, I'm going to be a vet. That was a financial blow, right? I mean, $350 for 4 stitches. And then I go to my son's baseball game, and I'm a coach for him. He's 12 years old. And we're at this baseball game, and our team is not very good this year, okay? And we're struggling, right? So we're on the verge of getting our first victory of the season. We're up 7-6. It's the bottom of the last inning, and we just need 3 outs. We're going to get our first victory. And I'm feeling for these kids, because these kids they want a victory so bad. And they're so close. Did we win? No. We did not win. And so I go home dejected, right? An emotional blow after that tough loss where we lose in the last inning. And I go home and I'm just like, man, I'm done with this day, right? And I look outside. It's 8:45 at night. And I look out at our swimming pool, our above-ground swimming pool, and it's got a foot of water missing. And it's going down fast. There's a leak in the pool. So now I'm like going to Home Depot to get Flex Seal, as seen on TV, waterproof tape, and my wife is over on the deck with a flashlight because it's dark now. You know, the only thing missing is a snorkel, all right? Because I'm scuba diving underneath here, and I'm sealing off this leak, right? And the water's cold, and finally it's done, man. But what a day, right? What a day of trial. All right? I'm sure you have those days. Then I open up the book of James, and he says in chapter 1, verse 2, consider it all joy, my brother, when you face trials of various kinds. James was a comedian, I think. But what did he mean when he said trials will bring you joy? Or how do you have joy when you have trials? Well, I think trials, the answer to that question is in my title. Trials allow you to prove your faith. Trials will develop your faith, if you will. Trials develop your faith. James gives multiple examples in this book. He jumps around a lot, but in his book he mentions people like Abraham, who went through an intense trial, right, to prove his faith. And Rahab was mentioned, and Job is mentioned, and Elijah is mentioned. Their trials developed their faith, because trials do that. Now raise your hand if you like a challenge. Anybody like a challenge? Honestly, sometimes getting you to raise your hand is a challenge. But I love a challenge. Not always the part where it's grueling, in the midst of the challenge, right? It's tough, you want to give up, but in the end, what happens when you make it through that trial, when you overcome that obstacle? You're stronger, you're better, right? That's the goal, that's the joyous part, if you will, the joyful part of going through a trial. I think that's what James is teaching us in this book. Trials develop your faith. For he goes on to say, after consider it joy, he says in verse 3, you know what the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. Now we don't really use that word very often, right? What does steadfastness mean? Patience. Patience. And when patience has its full effect, you will be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. So how do you prove your faith? Back to that, right? How do you prove your faith is genuine? I think the answer is with our trials. The everyday trials that we go through. Those are the works that I believe James is talking about. So the next time you have one of those days, or maybe it's a season of life that you're really, really struggling to get through, just know the whole process of developing your faith, this is God's plan. And think of the butterfly. If the butterfly does not struggle to fight its way out of the cocoon, it will never have the strength to fly. You can't help it. It's got to work its way out, and then it can fly. Trials will develop your faith. And then that's when it gets really good, because when you have genuine faith, you will produce fruit. Jesus said this, one of my favorite verses, John 15:8. God is glorified. God is glorified when you bear much fruit and prove to be my disciples. When you bear much fruit and prove to be my disciples. Trials develop your faith. Genuine faith produces fruit. And that's what James is talking about.